And so for Hume, knowledge of the world must be grounded in experience. Science had turned him into an empiricist, and of course he wasn't the last convert. Rosenberg calls empiricism the official epistemology of science. Epistemology here is the study of the nature of knowledge.
Yeah, how we know things.
Mm-hmm. And so empiricism, our sense experience, is how we come to know things. It is the epistemology of science. All right, so with that as a background, Rosenberg has given us, now he's going to question three pillars. Yeah, the three main pillars that we use to come up with this. So he's going to question our sense experience, right, as a good skeptic should do, right?
Should we trust our senses? Should we look down the train tracks, they come to a point, should we trust that they do come to a point?
Yeah.
Or should we walk down and see if they ever come to a point?
Secondly, he's going to question the notion of induction, which is a logical notion that we'll get to in just a second. And then finally, he's going to question reasoning.
All reason.
Yeah, all of reasoning, right? As a good skeptic. Because again, in this chapter, he's trying to tell us, what does a good skeptic look like? Well, a skeptic has a thorough and consistent skepticism, right? This is the general skepticism that he's been talking about, that he introduced to us at the beginning. All right, so the first one is skepticism about sense impressions or sense perception, right? Our senses. And so he says, suppose you're hiking through a mountain near your house, enjoying the way the green conifers stand out against the gray sky, the craggy cliffs. In the distance, you see a strangely twisted tamarack tree about 10 feet away. In actuality, he says, you're really seeing only an image, he tells us, right, of that tree. An image that is behind your eyes and behind your skin. The tree itself clearly isn't in our head, right? There's no little tamarack tree in our head, right?
Although the light theoretically bounces off the tree, hits our eye, and actually gets reflected. So what our brain perceives is an upside down image that it turns right side up.
Right, but it's not the tree; it's just an image.
Right, yeah,
and it's on its head is what you're saying.
Yeah,
what you just described.
What we're seeing on TV isn't actually the people; it's photons hitting the screen. Those are the old tube ones, but it's diodes lighting up in certain intensities that create a pattern. You're not actually seeing people on the screen.
Amazing, right? But it sure, but we think that's what it
does look pretty good.
So he says, of course, it seems for all the world that we're seeing the tree, or with your TV analogy, right, the people. But that's only because our optical faculties, including the mind and its construction of the image, are remarkably advanced, right? So here's his first issue. The most we can say about the tree idea, he tells us, is that it is merely a representation of the tree. So this is, he calls this representationalism. Sometimes in philosophy it's called representational realism, right? We only see a representation. The idea in your head stands for or represents the tree, but it's not the tree. There isn't a little tree in the back of our head. So that's the first thing he wants us to know. Secondly, he wants us to know that there's something further he says we believe about the tree idea, namely that it resembles the tree in important respects. It looks like, in quotes he puts, the tree. But then he says, why should we think that? Why should we think, right, that it looks like what we think the tree is, right?
Well, and we see that, especially Hollywood has forever changed the way that we look at things, because when you see representation of a camera, a shot that a camera is taking in, you don't see depth. And so people can do tricks with a camera by putting people in the foreground, making them seem bigger, and people in the background to make them seem smaller. So then you have the giant towering over the little person, and all you've done is just move a distance. So your sense perception says, oh, that's a little person and that's a giant. But that's not at all what it's representing. There are theoretically two people of the same size that are just standing different distances from the camera.
Right. So the question is, our sense perceptions can fool us, they can trick us, or we don't even know whether they're fooling us or tricking us, right?
Yeah.
He says,
we should be skeptical of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point he's getting at, right? We could be having a vivid dream. We could be and here's a philosophical, illustration that's, that's used ad nauseum. A brain in a vat.
Yeah.
Right?
Or as how most people kind of think of it, you're stuck in the matrix, in the pods, as the battery generated power.
All right, so that's all our representations could be. How do we trust them? How do we know? How do we determine the accuracy of them? Right? How do we know it's true what we're looking at? That's the skepticism that he wants us to be aware of with regard to our sense perception.